Hi, welcome to Notable Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Schaefer. Today we have another asylum case to discuss with you today because of how notable it is. If you joined us yesterday, we talked about imputed political opinion with an asylum case. And I also mentioned how it is very rare to have your case granted after the asylum interview. Most cases get referred to immigration court. Today's case is notable because our client was approved within 2 months of filing her application. She was approved at the asylum interview, which is very difficult to do. Her case did have a wrinkle in it, which would mean that normally if you have any issue whatsoever, and by issue I mean any type of criminal history, you went to another country before coming to the US, or you came to the US, returned to the country you're scared of now, and then came back, which is the last scenario is what happened in this case. So whenever you have that, your chances of getting approved at the actual interview is very low. So this case was because of the way we prepared the application, and I will get into that in a minute. Before I do, I just want to issue a warning that the subject matter of this, or the facts of this case, are graphic. They are not suitable for all ages. They're all true, but I have kind of sugar-coated the facts a little bit or softened them, but you should still be aware if you're watching this that it is still a little graphic. So this is a client who is a native and citizen of Nigeria. Her claim was based on her ethnicity in the Igbo tribe, as well as her membership in a particular social group, which can actually be defined in many different ways. In her case, it was women who were unable to get out of a marriage or subjected to female circumcision or FGM. But her case was a really difficult, factually difficult to handle the facts that were there. Now, again, I'm going to explain her case because I think it's important because it also highlights why we have asylum in this country. You hear a lot of bad things about asylum in the press, and a lot of confusion about what it really does and who's really eligible. But this case, there was no question she was eligible, and what she went through, this is the type of person that should be granted asylum. And we wanted to highlight how you're able to give yourself the best chance to get your asylum interview granted quickly. So she entered the US. Her last entry was 2018. She came with a B2 visitor visa. A few months later, she came to her office with a friend to find out about how to get a green card through marrying a US citizen. So as we do with all our clients who come to meet with us and ask us a question like that, we say, well, are you dating someone you're looking to get married to? Like, what's going on? She said no. And we're like, okay, well, you can't marry someone just to get a green card. Not only is it a really bad idea and not going to work, it's illegal. So why would you want to do something like that? And then she told us, well, I'm afraid to return to Nigeria. So I said, okay, well, why are you afraid to return? And then she told us one of the most horrific stories I've ever heard. I'll never forget this woman because I couldn't believe how articulate she was, despite her very little education, and how she was able to describe what went on. But she basically spelled out for us, like, starting at age 8, she's been subjected to horrific abuse, physical and sexual abuse. It started when she was 8. Her parents didn't have enough money to send her to school, and where she lived in Nigeria, you had to pay for school. So they sent her to go live with her uncle, who could afford for her to send her to school. And she was only 8 years old, and a couple weeks after moving in with her uncle, he started to molest her. Well, when he was molesting her, he realized that she was not cut down there or subject to FGM, and said it was an abomination, like, we can't have this. And 2 days later, she was held down by her aunt and another woman in the village, and they circumcised her. And she described, the process in graphic detail about what happened, because at 8 years old, you remember that. And the blood loss was so bad the next day she couldn't even go to school. So she continued to have problems with her reproductive system ever since the circumcision. But, she lived with the uncle. He continued to molest her. When she turned 14 years old, he said, he basically sold her to marriage. Somebody came in, paid him to marry her. The man was 35. She was 14. She had no choice. So I know where I'm at in this story. Because of the circumcision, though, she couldn't get pregnant. And she would get beaten by her husband and, tormented. And the abuse really was even worse than when she lived with her uncle. She wanted to run away, but there was nowhere for her to go. And the local government really was the village elders, and they would not allow her to leave because the law said you can't leave a marriage unless the man asks you to leave the marriage, and he did not want her to leave. 10 years later, she still couldn't get pregnant. Her husband finally got fed up with her and kicked her out. She had nothing, no money, no phone, no transportation, nothing. So she spent, thank you, Lambert. So she spent however long she needed living on the street, hawking water, which is like, you see the people with those big tubs on their head with water going up to cars and people to sell them. So she did that until she had enough money to buy a bus ticket to get back to her parents, which they were, a few hours by bus away. So she gets home and her parents, they were shocked. They had no idea any of this was going on. They couldn't believe how out of it she was physically and emotionally. They called a friend who was a doctor. He brought her to a clinic. She saw a psychologist, and for the first time ever, her botched circumcision was finally treated medically. But unfortunately, her story doesn't end here. It's not happily ever after. Eventually, her uncle showed up at the parents' house saying, well, I got someone new for you to marry. You got to come with me. Her parents tried to stop him, but what he did was he paid off all the village elders who, they're basically, like I said, they're like the governing body in the village. And so they weren't able to stop him themselves, and he dragged her off. But she was able to, in the fight, he fell to the ground and she took off and she ran. So where am I? Oh, also, while this was happening, her doctor friend said, look, this is not okay. We need to get you out of this country. I'm going to help you get a passport and a visa to the US. And if you go there for a few months, hopefully your uncle will move on. He'll forget about it and move on. And he says, but you can't violate the immigration law. You're not going to be allowed to stay there for 6 months. You have to come back. And she said, okay. So she did just that. And in 2017, she came to the US, stayed for a few months. The uncle the parents were relocated by the doctor in Nigeria during this time period. So the uncle didn't know where they were. They hadn't heard from him. So she went back. But then a few months later, I don't know exactly the time period, but shortly after she returned to Nigeria, well, her uncle found them. They found them again. He had a new person for her to marry. And this time it was even worse because this person that she was supposed to marry was part of an ethnic group that believed that pregnant women are to be circumcised. So she would be recircumcised if she was able to conceive. So at this point, this is when she was able to run away from him. Again, called the doctor. The doctor came, picked her up. She went to live with him for a little. He goes, look, your uncle's going to find us again. So he's like, let's go make a police report. He did. The police were like, this is a family matter. I'm not getting involved. Would not help her. Basically, what ended up happening is he's like, he's going to find us again. You just got to go to the US again. And I don't think you're going to be able to come back. So she hopped on a plane, came back here. And like I said, she came and met with us a few months later. We got everything together. And I told her, you were persecuted before your first trip to the US. And it was the same persecution when we returned. So you have to explain, why weren't you afraid to return then, but you are now? She wrote a very detailed statement that took us, a few weeks to really get right. and we submitted it, and it explained that, look, I didn't want to break the law. I thought it was safe, but it wasn't. And that was accepted by the asylum office. So within 2 months of submitting her application, this was before COVID and when things were going pretty quick, because they said all asylum interviews would happen within 30 days, and this one actually did. So within 2 months of filing, she had her asylum granted. So we were really excited because I told her, don't be surprised if you have to go to immigration court. And if she were to have to go to immigration court, she would still be waiting, and she probably would be waiting for years longer in order to get before the immigration judge again. So I mentioned, like I said, I mentioned that yesterday, and that's why this is such a notable approval. And because this is, to me, one of the clearest cases of asylum that you can have where, look, you have no freedom. If you go back to your country, you're going to be subjected to the same thing. The government's not going to protect you. They've made that clear. And that's why we have the asylum law. So if you think that you're eligible for asylum, give us a call. We're happy to assess it for you. I encourage you to check out our previous lives, yesterday notable approval on our imputed political opinion. We also had one on missing the 1 year filing deadline. We got that asylum approved. That was taped on Thursday. I recommend you look at all of them. Follow us on Facebook, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss another live. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. And we are going to do our Q&A, our next one on asylum. So tomorrow's notable approval will be another exciting asylum case for you. Thanks for watching.